I'm so glad you've chosen to join us. We have a wonderful group of speakers that will share tools and strategies that will be very helpful to you, your family, and your community. I want to thank our committee that planned this event tonight, and I want to especially thank our presenters who've worked hard and shared their time preparing for this forum. My name is Janet Francis, and I'm the Executive Director of the Eastlake Educational Foundation. I want you to know that this is a part of an ongoing series of forums brought to you by the Eastlake Educational Foundation in partnership with our school districts and community partners. And one of those partners is the Eastlake High School PTSA, also the Sweetwater Union High School District, the San Diego Office of Education, and the Chula Vista Elementary School District. I also want to thank our sponsors, Cox Communication and North Island Credit Union, who's actually provided a $100 gift certificate tonight as a prize. So we'll draw someone's name at the end of the evening. Add a little fun to the night. It's now my pleasure to introduce you to Gloria McCurdy. Gloria is well known to many of us and is a true community servant. She's served as principal within Chula Vista Elementary School District for 18 years. 9 of those years, she was principal at Olympic View Elementary. Gloria serves on the Eastlake Educational Foundation Board of Directors and volunteers her time to support many educational endeavors, including efforts that promote STEAM education and support for military families. She is a trusted member of our community, and we are fortunate to have her leading our very important conversation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet, for your kind words. Welcome again, everyone. With the COVID crisis and our children being at home most of the time, there is increasing concern with our children's social emotional wellness. We are privileged tonight to have 2 experts in the field who will provide us with insights and effective practical strategies that you can use with your children at home. Elizabeth Janulis is the Director of Multi-Tiered System of Supports in the Chula Vista Elementary School District. Ms. Janulis works with administrators, teachers, and staff to support the whole child academically, behaviorally, and through social emotional learning. She has previously worked as a program specialist, behavior specialist, and school psychologist. Elizabeth is a board-certified behavior analyst, has a master's degree in educational psychology, and a certificate of advanced graduate studies in school psychology from Northeastern University. Her professional interests and specialties include trauma-informed care, mindfulness, restorative practices, universal screening, positive behavior interventions and supports, and social emotional learning. Welcome, Elizabeth. Next slide.
I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Next slide, please. We also have Heather Nemor, who is a program specialist for student wellness and positive school climate at the San Diego County Office of Education. Ms. Nemor provides technical assistance, coaching and training to districts and school communities across the county and state in suicide prevention, student staff mental health and wellness, and positive school climate. Ms. Nemor has 18 years of leadership experience in the family strengthening field at the local, state, and national level, and was instrumental in the development and sustainability of a network of 5 school-based family resource centers in the South Bay. Additionally, she taught sociology courses in the surrounding community colleges and National University. Welcome, Heather. We are glad to have both of you with us. Si usted acaba de unirse a la presentación y quiere escuchar en español, favor de seleccionar el chat para tener acceso a la información. Ms. Janulis and Ms. Nemor will approach the issue of social emotional wellness through 4 questions. If you have a question for our speakers, please enter it in the chat window. They will be answered at the end of our presentation. Thank you. Our first question: what strategies can I put in place today to support social emotional wellness at home?
Okay, if you can go to the next slide, please. All right, so really excited today to be talking to parents. We at County Office train all of our school staff, our district staff, and we really believe it's so important to deliver the same messages and information to parents. So one thing we've been really embedding in our trainings is the importance of us adults being able to kind of check in and do just daily check-ins and to really gauge where are we on emotional, mental health, physical health, all of it. So it's really important to check in with ourselves each day and also with our kids. So managing our emotions means how we deal with our emotions. It involves checking in with how we're feeling, asking if we want to continue feeling that way or shift to a different feeling. So it's such a great time right now to get rid of any old habits that were not working for us and replace them with healthy habits and figure out what we can do to keep some of the same things that we were doing before to have that regularity and continuity. So, in my family, we before COVID and now we still do Friday movie night. That's something that's consistent. So this visual here gives you kind of a quick idea of what are some things that I can check in with myself. And some of them seem so simple, but I will tell you, a regular day for me, sometimes I realize I haven't gone outside once and I've just been going, or the meals, I'll just grab whatever I can. And even though some of us are working from home, some of us are supporting our kids in distance learning, and some of us are going to work, all of the myriad of possibilities, it's so important for our mental health to do those basic things: sleeping, showering, making sure we eat well, making sure we move our body is so important. And more importantly, how do we connect with others in a time of physical distancing with others? So we'll be sharing some tips around that, but these are just some quick questions that you can ask yourself. And so one thing I just wanted to highlight on this, it's so important to have kind thoughts to ourselves. We got to give ourselves grace and not try to place blame on ourselves or hold ourselves to such a high standard. We're all doing the best that we can. And as parents, if we can just help keep our kids mentally, emotionally, physically safe, we're doing a lot. We're doing a great job. All right, so next slide, please. So boundaries. This is something that is more important now than ever because so much of the lines are blurred between, we're in home working, we're in school, we have our personal life. So the lines get blurred. And it's important to set those boundaries. And what setting boundaries does, it helps us maintain social and psychological boundaries, and it protects our mental health and relationships as well. So just as keeping those physical boundaries from others right now to protect our physical health, keeping boundaries is just as important. And so you can see here in the visual, on the far left, we have what we call healthy boundaries, and there's a dotted line around it because there is give and take, there's flexibility. So an example would be, for me, it's really important that I do my yoga every day, but how do I do that? Well, I have a full work schedule and I have 2 kids at home that are distance learning. So I make that a priority. And some days it doesn't happen because I got to have other priorities. So there's give and takes. The one in the middle are limited, non-existent boundaries. And that's where we kind of are people pleasers and we say yes to everyone. And then it takes a toll on ourselves, and we realize we're forgetting about our own self-care. And then the one on the right is the opposite, where we have rigid boundaries and we're not flexible and open. And right now is a really important time to have flexibility. So when we think about boundaries, we want to think about choosing what do we want to say yes to in our lives, and make sure that they align with our values and our goals and our needs. So my example during this pandemic and all of the other social and racial issues that are going on and political, I have realized that I need to control and set boundaries around the amount of news I take in. And so for me, one thing I had to do was stop watching the news, stop looking at all of the articles and different things that are out there. And I signed up for CNN, 5 things you need to know today. And it works for me. I get it, I read it, I'm done. And it calms me, and I don't have these anxieties of looking at what's going on in the news. So thinking about that, give yourself permission to say no. And my favorite sociologist, Brene Brown, she says, saying no to others means saying yes to ourselves, even when it risks disappointing others. So remember, it's a form of self-care. And also know what you're comfortable doing and what you're not doing. And it's important to adjust your expectations on a day-to-day basis and do what's best for your family. So having again, the healthy boundaries with that flexibility. All right, next slide, please. So social connection is critical during the times of hardship. So leaning on our support networks is very important. We're all trying to adjust to this new normal, and feeling isolated or unsupported can make things worse. So it's important to reach out to our friends and our family and colleagues if we have them, and really find ways to connect with others. And what I like about webs of support, it's a way to relationship map for yourself. And you can do this with your kids as well. So there are 3 layers of webs of support. So emotional support. So who in your life can you turn to that can give emotional support? So for me, it's my very best friend. When I am having a hard time, I need to vent, talk to someone who's going to understand me, I call my BFF, and she's there for me. Informational. So who in your life can be a source of information for you? So an example, another dear friend of mine is a nurse practitioner. Boy, a lot of good information when I'm worried about a rash on my kid's body, or if I'm not sure, what if to go to the doctor for something. I can reach out to her and get that information like that. So who do you have that can provide that information? And then lastly, practical. So as parents, we all need to lean on each other and support each other. Pre-COVID, I was a carpool mom. Not sad to say that I was a carpool mom. I will be again one day soon. But even though we're not carpooling right now, my carpool mom and I are still supporting each other. So if my daughter's best friend, if they want to get together, I'll take, you pick up, and we provide support. So who is it that can give that practical support for you in your life? And just one more tip to remember is, if you want to improve your health, hang out with healthy people. And if we hang out with unhealthy people or anxious or stressed people, emotions are contagious and they bleed. And so really think about who do I want to choose in this web of support that can provide the positive surroundings. And something I always like to share is, one thing you can do too is, think about some people in your life that you really care about, and then put them on your phone, and on a rotating basis, call them and check in on them, because those check-ins, we can hold each other accountable with our friends and family as well. All right, next slide, please.
All right, so I'm now going to focus on some things that we can do immediately today with our kids. But thank you, Heather, so much for sharing those first pieces, because the best thing we can do to create an emotionally healthy environment for our kids is for ourselves to be emotionally healthy, right? Our kids look up to us, they learn from us, they copy our behaviors. So a fun little example that I have of that is I have a little baby at home. and she's 11 months old. And now, if you pretend like you're crying and there's a doll nearby, she'll pick up the doll, hug it, and kiss it. We never taught her that, right? She just saw that that's what we did with her, and she started to do that. Unfortunately, the same thing would happen in reverse, right? So one of my good friends just shared a story with me where she brought her little one, who's about 3, over to see her grandmother, so her mother-in-law, and she used a bad word, and she's like, oh no, she definitely heard that from us, right? And it's so obvious when they say that too. So it works both ways. So we need to pay attention to our own behavior. But another thing that we can put in place today is to really focus on relationships. We are in a very stressful time before. This word is out there all the time, but it's true. It's unprecedented, right? We did not have a script for this. And when we are under a great deal of stress, one of the best buffers for stress, one of the most protective factors that we can have are good, healthy relationships. And there's a lot of wonderful research that backs this up, right? So even when people have experienced a tremendous amount of stress, that they can be completely healthy and well if they work on it. But of course, if they had that one really healthy relationship when they were kids. So it really is even life saving, that you could say. But I just want to focus on something for a little bit. Sometimes when we're trying to have these secure attachments with our kids, or we're trying to think, oh, we want to be there for them, we think really, really big, right? And we try to think of all of these things that we should be doing, and it becomes very stressful. But here's a list of things that they found in the research that actually were the most positive and effective when people looked back on their childhood. So one of them there looked happy to see me. So I have a baby, like I said, so it's really easy to do that, right? I come home, she gets very excited, she smiles, she waves her arms. I have a huge smile on my face. I'm so happy to see her. But that's easy to do when she's 11 months, right? But this is what we need to continue doing with our kids as they get older, right? And we need to continue doing that. Another story I love to share, and I have lots of stories, so I'm going to apologize in advance for that. But I once had a student who was frequently in the principal's office, right? So he was oftentimes in the principal's office. And I had an office, I was a school psychologist at a school, and he would come by and see me. And I was afraid one time, I was like, you know what, maybe I'm accidentally reinforcing his behavior because he's so happy to be in my office. Maybe he'd rather be here than in class. And so one day I just asked him and I said, what's going on? Why do you love coming to my office so much? And he turned to me and he said, well, you're happy to see me. You smile when you see me. Right. And so that meant the world to him. And it really was. He's a super neat kid. Right. And letting him know that it's not always by our words, but it's our nonverbal communication. Another thing that adults said when they look back on their childhood is that they took time for me. Right. That sounds so easy, but with the chaos in our life right now, it's not necessarily as easy as it sounds. But we'll be talking about some ideas later on in the presentation and in our conversation. But one of the things to do, even if it's just putting your cell phone down for a few minutes, maybe it's your first 5 minutes home with your child, or if you're home working and they're doing their schooling, maybe it's as soon as they're done with their schooling, but a time during the day where they just get your undivided attention. Okay, another thing people said is they saw me in a positive light. They pushed me to do my best, right? So they knew what they were capable of. They helped them be accountable. This is one of my favorites. They listened to me. So as adults, we so often want to give our kids advice. We want to fix things for them, but think about that with your spouse. Do you often, when you're sharing things with your spouse or with your partner or a friend, do you want them to fix it? Or sometimes do you want them just to listen, right? And this last one, so important, they knew me, right? So that they felt that their parent really knew them, they really understood them. And the way that we often do that is by the last one, right? That they listened to me. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so another thing, and this says keep because some of our routines have gone out the window a little bit with COVID, although I think we have new routines now. But keeping routines in place, and also, if we don't have them, then strengthening and putting routines in place. Now, you might say, okay, routines, there's so much going on. I just want to be flexible. Yes, flexibility is great. But when kids have routines and consistency, it makes them feel emotionally safe. I know what's going to happen. I know what's expected. There's a routine and a rhythm to my day. Okay, so at the beginning of COVID, a lot of us were in our pajamas all day. Maybe we still are now. Loungewear is very popular, right? But it might be time to sort of think, okay, let's start thinking about really having those routines. Okay, so having a bedtime routine, having meals that are consistent, right? Having a way where we get ready. And this one, the morning routine is so important because maybe pre-COVID, when you were getting your kiddos ready for school, you might have been rushing out the door, but then there was that drive to school or that walk to school where you all had a chance to breathe and sort of reset. Now it's we're rushing, 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 and then we're signing on to Zoom or signing on to, in our case, Teams, right? So there's not really that time just to take a deep breath. So having those morning routines, giving yourselves all a few minutes to sort of refresh and take a deep breath. Jobs or chores, might be better to call them jobs. Chores just sounds like, oh, I don't want to do that, right? And it sounds like it might be a fight. This might seem like something our kids don't like, but it's building that sense of responsibility and maybe even finding things that they do enjoy or they feel that they can contribute. And finally, we talked about having those routines, but balancing it with downtime and flexibility. You don't want to be so regimented that you don't even have time for downtime or play. Okay, so make sure that there's, of course, time for that. And the weekend's a time to relax a little bit on those routines as well. All right, next one, please. Making sleep a priority. So, what can I do today? Get a good night's sleep. Sleep is incredibly restorative. It's restorative for our brain, it's restorative for anxiety. And if we have too little sleep, it's like having a blood alcohol level. There's actually a lot of studies behind that. If you consistently get like 6 hours of sleep a night, it's like having a like you would be inebriated, right? So that's not what we want to do for ourselves. It's also not what we want for our kids. So most people are surprised when they see this slide of how much sleep a day we actually need. So our 3 to 5 year olds, 10 to 13 hours a day. Our 6 to 12 year olds, those are most of our kids in elementary, right? They need 9 to 12 hours of sleep a night. Our 12 to 18-year-olds, it says 8 to 10 hours. Sometimes they actually get even more than that, right? But anyhow, this is the minimum recommendation, but really working on getting enough sleep. And one of the best ways to do that, and this will not be your kid's favorite, but if you make this change over the weekend or next week, you can tell your kids, you can blame me. Say, you know, Elizabeth said to do this and we need to follow that. It's taking those TVs and phones out of their room, right? So they will not like me. Um, but at least having a way where maybe you're all sort of accountable for that, turning off those blue lights, making sure that we have a chance to sort of wind down. So in the picture and the visual there, they're reading a book together that gives your son, yourself just a chance to sort of wind down. So putting those routines in place where it's not just that you're going, going, going in and sleeping, but think back to when they were toddlers or back to when they were babies and you did a bath time and you read a story and you did all that stuff to sort of get you ready for sleep. Your kids need that and we need that too. Okay. And again, you're more than welcome to blame me if you end up removing a device from their room. All right, next one. All right, so Heather already mentioned this. I need to mention it again. Limit the consumption of news. It right now, especially, is it very anxiety provoking for us, but also our kids. And even if we think that they're not watching it, they usually will hear it and hear things that they don't have a lot of context for because the news is a little bit scary right now. So Heather mentioned that she watches or she subscribes and gets the 5 things of the day. I actually subscribe. So CNN has something called the Good Stuff where they send you an email every Saturday of all the positive news of the week. So that's what I subscribe to because I just need that positivity. And I do the same thing. I stopped watching the news and I just look at headlines. And if there's something I need to know more about, I do, but I only allow myself to do that once or twice a day. But for our kids, really limiting that for them. And if there's something we want them to see, you can always record it and just watch that part as well. All right, next one. This is one of my favorite ones. Get outside. So Heather mentioned that this is hard to do, right? It is. We are inside, we are on screens, and there's very limited places that we can go safely now. So one way just to sort of unwind, what can I put in place today? This will probably be tomorrow because of the time of the day, but taking a time just to be in nature, it's relaxing. It helps us all reset. It'll help us with that sleep too, because that resets our sleep cycle. But getting outside and with nature, whether that's going for a walk, whether that's going to the beach or a park safely, in whatever way you can, but just allowing your kids to just play and play with them. So one of my favorite things to do now, when I get home from work, we all go for a family walk. It helps my husband and I sort of reset from our day. We get our stress out. Our little one's happy. She's in the stroller. Our dog is actually getting some exercise because she needs to lose a few pounds, right? So we're all happy. We're all getting outside. We're all getting refreshed. And it's just a nice way to sort of help us transition as well.
So many great suggestions. Remember, foster relationships, keep routines, and take care of yourself. Thank you so much. Our next question is, what are strategies that I can use to cope with the stressors during these chaotic and uncertain times?
Okay, next slide, please. All right, so, the human mind seeks certainty and control, but right now it is impossible in this current environment to have certainty and control. So making peace with what is out of control can create mental energy for you to focus on what is within your power. So we cannot control what is happening around us with everything going on, but we can control many things. And the most important thing is we can control how we respond to it. So wanted to give a visual separation of what are some things we can control and can't control. So first, we've talked a lot about staying healthy. And so we can control how we're taking care of ourselves, not, wearing a mask, social distancing, just washing our hands a lot, all of those things, we have that control. How we cope, that's actually in our control. And that's why we're sharing strategies with you today, because a lot of them are coping strategies. And, some might resonate with you and some might not. So it's a matter of figuring out which ones work for you and maybe try them all and figure out which was the most effective. How we treat others, we can control that. Right now, our world needs more kindness than ever. And so giving people grace, and we all, again, I know I've already said this, we're all doing the best that we can do in our current circumstances. And then our choices about safety, how much help and support you seek. So again, going back to that web of support, who can I turn to? We know that people's mental health and wellness, they do better when they're surrounded by people, when they're connected to people and have a support system. The time you spend worrying, this one is critical, because worrying, when a worry pops up in your head, figure out if it's something you can plan for, and if there's nothing you can do, then there's nothing that can be done by worrying. And so I love this quote. I did an anxiety training yesterday. Worrying doesn't empty tomorrow of its sorrows. It empties today of its strengths, because we spend so much time worrying. I'll give you an example. We had contact with one of our neighbors, and my husband got a text a few days later, and he said, "Hey, my son tested positive for COVID, so I'm going to get tested." And we were like, my mind started spinning, and because we've managed to stay safe and healthy all this time, and I couldn't even focus or concentrate. I felt sick to myself. I was like, oh my gosh. And I realized, Heather, I will not stand up here and I will not train on anything I don't practice. So I'm always reverting to the strategies that I share, and because I have to walk the talk. So I did what I tell people to do when they're feeling anxious. You distract yourself, right? You find distractions, and it was incredible. It worked. So, and then, he turned out to test negative, and I thought, wow, all that time I could have spent worrying would have been for nothing. So we really got to, think about what can we control and what we can't, and not spend time worrying. Being in the present moment, which is really mindfulness, is the most effective thing we can do. And then we need to let go what we can't control. So what other people think, what they say or do, try not to take things personally, because we can't control that. Natural disasters, macro issues like we're experiencing now, And so we just don't want to use that energy, deplete it in areas of worry. All right, next slide. Okay, so this is my favorite topic and one of my favorite coping strategies, which is breathing. Breathing is the fastest way to shift intense emotions, and it shifts your experience. So being able to breathe, stop, pause, breathe is probably one of the most powerful tools you can use. It restores your ability to think clearly. Just breathing can change your brain. You can be relaxed in 30 seconds. It's free, it's available 24/7, and it's easy to do. And so what the research shows is that when we have more oxygen, the chemistry of our brain changes, blocking effects of stress that shut down our ability to think clearly. And so when we can take these slow, deep breaths, it relaxes the body and the mind and helps us feel calmer, and we can begin to problem solve once we've done that. So for me, before I go into a grocery store, which is a very stressful event, I revert to my breathing. So I want to take a moment to invite everybody to just walk through a couple of breaths if you're comfortable doing so. And it's helpful for many to have a visual to guide us through this. And so we'll do 2 rounds together, and we'll follow the visual on the screen, and I'll walk us through it. So we'll start now by breathing in. And out. Breathe in. And out. So what I like about the visual, it shows or illustrates how often we will breathe, we use breath, but we don't always breathe into our capacity, our full capacity, and breathe out. There's so many different ones we can do. There's square breathing, there's 5-4-7 breathing. This one is just a brief example. So if we can just stop and take a deep breath in, as deep as we can, and then we can even hold it if it's helpful, and then breathe out, but breathing out and emptying those lungs as much as possible. So just remember that, you know, if you're feeling nervous or stressful or whatever it might be, you always have this available to you. Okay, next slide, please. So intention setting, it's intention setting is a practice that helps you form new stories in your head. It gives your mind direction, and you can set an intention before anything you do. And what it does is it changes the conversation you have in your head. So I'll give the example. I have 2 kids at home. One's in 6th grade, one is in 9th grade. And when we started distance learning, it was an incredibly stressful time for me. And my son, my 6th grader, has an IEP. And so, you know, he's got a lot of challenges. And trying to just figure out the ins and outs of distance learning and how to get into the classes and how to access things, it was a huge struggle, and he needed a lot of help. And I would wake up every day and think, oh no, not another day of this. I can't do it. I'm working, I'm doing this. And as I did it more and more, I realized the tiny silver linings in all of this, and how, you know, gosh, I'm learning things I didn't pay attention to in 6th grade, like weather patterns and, you know, things about science. And I found so many little silver linings, but most importantly, I was able to become intimately aware and close of what his actual struggles are. I understand his disabilities more than I ever thought I could. And so now when I wake up, I tell myself, I get to teach my son today, not, oh gosh, I have to teach my son today. So that's an example of how we can set an intention. And so we often will go to automatic negative thoughts, which are called thinking errors, or we'll overgeneralize, or we'll catastrophize, we'll personalize, we'll blame. All of these things we do, but we can control that and cope with it through intention setting. So these are examples here. You can create your own, and it could be helpful to put them on a sticky. You put them around your house where you see them. You can put them as a phone saver, screensaver. But what's important to realize is that if you can imagine things, you are much more likely to achieve them. All right, next slide, please. Oh, this is another good one. Okay, positive self-talk. So again, we often will be really hard on ourselves. We naturally go to the negative, and being able to talk to ourselves in a way that is positive is very powerful. So when we're feeling anxious or unsettled, this can reground you in the present moment. The more we can be present and not think about how frustrating it is to go to the store, or worry about when school's going to be back in session, is going to be calming for ourselves. So instead of having that, innate bias to pay attention to the negative, we can have positive self-talk. So this is a simple one. It is so great. It is in all of our offices where we work, we use and practice this every day. And all it is you're telling yourself right here, right now, everything is okay. Because about 97% of the time it is. And so being able to have this and to be able to, again, post it wherever we need to remind ourselves. This can be a go-to message that we use. So right here, right now, everything is okay. And this is something, we use in our anxiety trainings. And so when we're feeling anxious, when we're feeling stressed, this could be a go-to coping strategy. All right, next slide, please. All right, so this is a great strategy for managing intense emotions and for self-regulating. So managing our emotions, it means how we deal with our emotions. It involves checking in with how we're feeling and really being true to that. So how it goes is it's rain. So the first thing is we want to recognize that we're experiencing something. So what we're doing here is just naming that emotion. So like, wow, I am so frustrated right now. And then we want to accept it. So we need to know my emotion. So what I have is the emotion of feeling frustrated. So we are recognizing it and accepting it. And then we want to investigate. So kindly ask ourselves, what's going on here? So we're just bringing an attitude of curiosity. And so just as one of my favorite scientist, researcher, Mark Brackett, who says we need to be emotional scientists, right? Because we need to investigate our emotions. And then non-identification. I have the thought and feeling, but I'm not that thought and feeling. So we don't want to personalize it, right? So it's okay to feel frustrated. I may dislike the emotion. It's discomfort, but it's not dangerous. So this is something that worked for me when working with my son on distance learning, and had so many days, so many frustrating days. And wow, I really got to model healthy regulation so I can co-regulate with him and find a way. So this was really helpful for me because it made me realize, wow, I'm frustrated. What is this about? Well, turns out I can't be a good program specialist, a mom, a teacher, and a wife all at the same time. And that's okay. But I was able to investigate that and come to terms with that and have more realistic expectations. And so, and by the way, it took half a year for us to find a rhythm to where things work. And I'm so happy to say my son independently does all of his work now without me. So it's been a positive journey. All right, Elizabeth.
All right, so some other things, and Heather, there were so many wonderful things that you shared there, and I will say that when you stopped doing the deep breaths, the visual was still going. So I continued to do a few more. So I really like that visual. But with self-regulation, so Heather just shared some really wonderful strategies. And again, it's so important that we model this because our kids will look to us. So if we want them to be regulated, like Heather was just sharing, then we need to be regulated ourselves. So we definitely want to teach and model those ways, but first, of course, showing how we do them. So Heather went over a fantastic way of teaching and sort of working with deep breathing with using a visual. A few more ways to do that with our kids of different ages. So if you have a student who or a child who's in TK or kinder or first, a great way to do that, just to introduce them to the idea, also is to tell them, you know, you smell the flowers and you blow out the candles. So smell the flowers, you breathe in through your nose, blow out the candles, right? So birthday candles, kids love blowing out birthday candles. You can even light some candles for them to blow out to practice, which they will find so exciting. And then they'll want to practice it all day. So just giving you that little warning there. But the reason why it's important to practice this, like Heather said, so you can realize your full ability to take that deep breath. A lot of times our kids, if you tell them to take a deep breath, they'll go like this, right? And rather than calming themselves down, that actually increases their heart rate. So one way is smelling the flower and blowing out the candles. Another way that I really like to do that and practice it with kids, because it's called belly breathing. So right when they breathe in, their tummy should get bigger, and when they breathe out, their tummy should get smaller. So it's actually just placing their hand on their belly and practicing those breaths. Okay. One of my favorite ways, and if you've heard me talk before, you may have heard this, is to do a little experiment with our kids. So I love them to find out, like Heather mentioned, curiosity for your feelings, right? Also curiosity for, does this actually work? Let's test our hypothesis. So you have them feel their pulse. So you'll be tempted to have them feel their neck, but with most elementary school kids, it's probably better just to put a hand over their heart. And they'll say, okay, my heart's, I can feel it. Then you have them and you join them. This is the fun part. You have them run in place as fast as they can for 1 minute and you time it. Then you have them put their hand back over their heart and you have them feel how fast their heart is breathing. And you ask them, when else do you feel this way? Oh, I feel this way before a test. And you're like, yeah, I feel that way before a job interview. Or, oh, I feel that way before I need to speak in front of other people. Or I feel that way when I'm really angry, my heart beats that fast. Exactly. Now we're going to try to take 10 deep breaths. And I usually count for them. So I'll have them breathe in through their nose if they can, to a count of 3, and actually out more slowly to a count of 5. That technique works for me. You can try pausing. Some kids like it, some kids don't. So again, it's a matter of preference. You'll try it. You have them do 10 deep breaths. You do it with them. And then they put their hand over their heart. And then they can feel how their heart rate actually slowed down. So that's a really fun way. Another way is through mindfulness. So, in all these strategies, what I like about mindfulness is you don't just practice it when you're anxious, it's a daily practice. Same thing with these strategies. You do not work on self regulation when you're stressed, right? You actually want to practice it when you're calm. Now, think of it this way. If your kids are stressed or they're not regulated, right? You want to tell them to calm down. But let's pretend that your mom or your significant other told you to calm down when you were stressed. Does that feel good? No, maybe I'm just speaking about my own relationship, but that usually doesn't feel very good, right? So, same thing with our kids. We want to practice this when they're calm, so they already have that tool in their toolbox. Then, when they're stressed, you can join them and do it with them. Okay, so for mindfulness, some exciting news for our CVESD parents. We just received a grant through Kaiser Permanente, where we will have a mindfulness program called Inner Explorer at 17 of our schools. But Inner Explorer was kind enough to give an initial experience to all of our schools. So, what's really exciting about this program is that there's a parent component where you can download an app for free and you can practice mindfulness in English or Spanish with your kids at home. So, we are just onboarding this program this month, and you can look for parent trainings to start in about 4 to 6 weeks. So, we'll share that information with you. So, super exciting. Another way for self regulation, right? We want to teach our kids and have a conversation when you're stressed, when you're anxious, when you're upset, what helps you? Sometimes for me, taking a walk or getting outside. So same thing with our kids, teaching them that play or movement can actually help us regulate. Journaling can help as well, sometimes getting out those feelings, or in reverse, even thinking of some things that we're grateful for, right? I like having gratitude and doing that around the dinner table, right? Everyone's saying what they're grateful for, not just at Thanksgiving, but throughout the year. Drawing can be another way to self-regulate that can really help our kids calm and relax if they're feeling a little stressed. And then I want to add on to a few things Heather mentioned. So Heather mentioned the idea of recognizing your emotions. So with our kids, we teach them that if you name it, you can tame it, right? So it's helping them label their emotions. And when you're reading books together or watching movies, like Heather said, she has that movie night with her family every Friday night, it's asking your kids, oh, how do you think that character felt? Right? What were they going through? Once they master that, then you do that with yourself and themselves, right? So naming those emotions. Heather also mentioned um, about positive self-talk. Another fun way to do this, when your kids are in distance learning and they're talking about something and they're like, oh, I just can't do it. You add the word yet to the end of that. Oh, I just can't do it yet, right? You help them build that growth mindset so they realize with practice they can improve. And what's exciting is I'll give you guys a sneak preview. Our parent newsletter for next week, or for next month, I'm sorry, is all on building self-efficacy. So having that growth mindset and the power of yet. So 3 words can make a big difference. So when you hear that negative self-talk, just add yet to the end of it. Okay, of course, we mentioned you want to model how you manage your own emotions. So you want to regulate yourself. Here's the big thing. Our kids usually think that we're pretty regulated throughout the day because we don't share with them. We try to hide our emotions for them. But it's totally okay. We're humans. We have emotions too. So next time you're feeling a certain way, it's okay to label that emotion and then also let your child know what you do to calm yourself down. Okay, of course, there's some things we want to have some boundaries, right? Heather talked a little bit about that, but it's a great idea just to say, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit stressed right now. I'm going to take a few deep breaths. Do you want to join me? Or, oh man, I had a really hard day today. I think I need to go for a walk. Why don't you come with me? Okay, so those are some great examples of how you can do that. And then finally, co-regulation. I think a lot of us were trained, I don't know if it's by super nanny or maybe I'm dating myself or what it was, that we have to ignore a lot of these behaviors from our kids, right? And of course, there's times where our kids will have attention seeking behaviors where we'll use a behavioral strategy, right? And we'll ignore it. There's actually a word for it. It's called planned ignoring. But I want us just to remember for a second, too, that our kids aren't expected to be able to manage their emotions all by themselves. We can't even do that. Okay. So, a big part of our brain that's important for doing that, our prefrontal cortex, the front part of our brain, doesn't fully develop until our mid 20s. And our kids are far younger than that. Right. So, when we see that they're having a hard time, we want to be present and attuned to their emotions and join them and helping them regulate. Okay, so if they're stressed out, rather than talking to them, oh, are you stressed? Maybe we start taking deep breaths. We're modeling that for them. Okay, we can make a suggestion, but remember, we want to practice these things when they're calm, but when they're struggling, it's okay to join them and join in them with trying to regulate that emotion. We're not doing anything wrong by doing that. I think there's some false information out there about that. All right, so I think we're ready to move on to the next question.
Thank you for those insightful strategies and examples. Our next question, how can I make sure my children find a healthy balance with so much screen time?
Great question.
Okay, thank you. Can you go to the next slide, please? It's a great question. All right, so just want to share a few tips for taking screen breaks. And, this is for us parents as well as our kids, because it applies to all. So one great strategy is being able to just set an alarm, whether it's, I don't know, recently my eye doctor said every 45 minutes you have to set an alarm and get away from your screen. They're finding more and more people that are getting eye exams are losing their far vision. This is what my eye doctor told me. It's not research. And because we're not like driving and doing all these things. So it's so important to take those screen breaks. And so it can be a reminder to go outside. Elizabeth talked a lot about different ideas.
Yeah, I
to
know,
breathe.
but preserving your vision.
Maybe you
That's important.
set
When
an
you're
alarm
driving,
to remember to
especially.
do that breathing activity, or take a walk or play, whatever it might be. And then chores. So building in chores throughout the day, or yeah, Elizabeth, I agree. I don't really use that word chores, but anyway, my kids more than ever, one of the silver linings in being at home with all of us is they're taking on more chores than they ever have
Yeah, put 2
before,
cups of
which
rice
helps
in there.
me in the long run, and it gets them off those on those screen breaks, and it gets them moving around. They're learning essential life skills, problem solving skills that they typically don't get enough of when they're in school. So it's such a great time to instill just these basic life skills that they are going to use for the rest of their life. So, taking out the trash and cooking and doing all these things. I was recently reading an article about how one way you can do this is setting a family rule after dinner. No one leaves the kitchen till it's all cleaned up, because it's a collective effort and it promotes togetherness and teamwork. And I'm like, I might start doing that one with my family. They're gonna love that. So, sorry, I have cats. They're running around. Modeling healthy screen time, as Elizabeth talked about, learned behavior, and our kids do what we do. And so I'm a big believer in really disconnecting from the phone. And so I'm one of those people, I don't have it on ever. So yeah, sometimes I miss out on emergency alerts and those kinds of things, but I just learned to check it a lot. It's just the sheer sound of dinging. And my kids used to be like, Mom, your phone, you got to get it. I'm like, no, I don't. It can wait. There's this pressure that our young people feel that we need to be available 24/7, and that is a myth. We got to really help them with that. So modeling that is so important. And then just have children create a list of off-screen activities. The reason why this is so helpful is because when they come to you, like my son does all the time, and he says, Mom, I'm bored. I have a list of things that we did together when he knows, like, there are things he enjoys. And so what about doing this? What about doing that? And so I can say that, but I also say good, because I think our kids need to experience boredom. It's a good thing. And so just having those go-to lists are really important. So with his distance learning and his PE class, if I'm not busy in a meeting, he comes to me and we do PE together. It's such a great way to get me off my screen, get me moving, get him moving, and we'll do all these fun things I never would have done with him if I in pre-COVID life. Okay, next slide, please. So Stanford University did a lot of research around, in today's world, what does a well-balanced child look like? And they wanted to know. So they did extensive research. They have scientists and researchers doing all kinds of stuff and surveying and so forth. And then they came out with the results. And what the results were PDF, which stands for playtime, downtime, and family time. And so the research conclusion was, for healthy development, our young people need 20 to 30 minutes a day of playtime, downtime, family time. And so what that looks like, playtime, it's playing, like I play with my son, we're doing all kinds of basketball and corn toss and all those things, playing. And yeah, they say it can be video games, that's actually considered playtime. But downtime, what downtime is complete downtime, no technology, maybe laying on your bed, chilling, listening to music. That's downtime. And so again, our kids need to be bored. They need to just decompress and do nothing sometimes. And so there's ideas. You're going to get this handout, but each of them, Stanford gives actual ideas of how you can embed this. And then family time. So it doesn't have to be necessarily eating dinner together around a table with your family, but having quality time together with no technology. So one of the principal, well, he's a superintendent now, I work with, he always talks about how Tuesday nights in his house, it's 80s night. So if it wasn't around in the 80s, they put it all away, which means pretty much all technology. And then they do board games and those kinds of things. So how can you embed that into rituals with your family? And so each of them they have very significant research around the different positive mental health and awareness that it creates in doing each of these 20 to 30 minutes a day. So when we train on anxiety, what we always share is one of the best strategies for anxiety is distraction. And what the research shows is one of the best distractions is playtime. So think about it. As adults, do you play enough as well? So create those opportunities. Stanford, it's called Challenge Success. They also have really great tools. They'll give you, you can download a free time for your day, and you can embed a schedule for your kids, and you embed the PDF into that. So there's a lot of other tools to support this. All right, Elizabeth.
All right, so remember, I was that person who said, just get the screens out of their room, right? Maybe at least at nighttime, just the remotes to those things or something like that. But our kids are on screen so much now. So rather than thinking of just removing them, I thought I'd share some alternatives or some ideas for being present that don't include screens. So one that I have, I'm not saying get rid of all your family movie nights. Those are great ways to bond together as a family. But maybe on occasion, swap a family movie night for a family game night. So sort of the idea that Heather was sharing with like the 80s night idea, but just really a time to be present with your family, to have fun together, and to also work on very important social skills that our kids might be missing out on right now because they're not able to practice those with other kids, but they can gain a lot from practicing those with their siblings and with you. So a great way is with those game nights. Another idea, cooking together. So as you see there in the picture, it might take longer, it might be a lot messier, but the memories will also be a lot grander, right? So having fun with that cooking together. And as an added bonus, if your kids get really good, that might mean less cooking for you in the future, right? Getting outside, we talked about that, but walks, bike rides, wiffle ball, sidewalk chalk, again, these things might, especially the sidewalk chalk, they might be messy, but they can be a lot of fun, right? Learning a new skill, something where you don't have mastery over it, but where both your child and you are learning a new skill could be something that could be really fun. Reading a favorite book together. So one of the things you might do here is think about one of your favorite books in childhood. So then it's special to you, and sharing that with your child, and then taking turns and just reading a little bit each night. So maybe it's a chapter book, and it's something that might even be beyond your child's current reading level on their own, but you get to share it with them, and it's fun and it's exciting. And if they've made a movie out of it, then that could even be a reward for the end there. Another idea, just actually taking time and eating your meals together. So not in front of the TV, but having good conversations, sitting around the table, taking your time to do that. And finally, making something together. So Legos is always a really fun one. It's getting to be, it'll be spring right around the corner. So maybe it's making, a garden together, doing a craft, or building a fort in your house, right? So thinking about those fun times that you had when you were in your house to make that fort. So just fun things to do that you can be present without your phone, without the TV, without the screens. And I think we're ready for the next one.
Okay. So what a lot of parents typically will want to know, like, when do I need to pay more attention? What are some warning signs? What's normal anxiety? What's regular everyday anxiety? So I wanted to share this simple mental health pain scale. And I love this because it's great for our kids. It's got the visualization, and it ranks it in between mild, moderate, and severe, just like we see on a mental health continuum. And so kind of wondering, is this normal? Where are my kids at? This will guide you through to see if it starts getting into that moderate and well, you hopefully get in before severe, but severe, we want to intervene. We want to ask questions. We want to check in. We want to get professional help if needed. And so one thing that kind of helps as well in guiding this is knowing that how do I know, is it, typical adolescent development or is it a mental health disorder? So a mental health disorder affects a person's thinking, emotional state, and behavior. And it needs to impact these three things. It impacts their ability to attend school, carry out daily activities, and engage in satisfying relationships. So if you notice that your kids or teens are falling into these extreme behavior changes, or that starting to not maybe lose interest in certain things that they liked and not replace them with others, those kinds of things. But you can always go back to these three things. Is it impacting their ability to attend school, carry out daily activities, engage in satisfying relationships? So hopefully the simple mental health pain scale is a great visual for you to guide you to kind of know when I need to maybe pay a little bit more attention, ask more questions, and intervene. Okay, next slide.
All right, and sorry, Heather, I was actually putting a link to that. Somebody was asking about it that they couldn't see it, so I put a link in the chat there. So some other signs, we want to be aware of signs of stress in ourselves and our kids. So again, our kids are looking to us as models. So signs of stress in us when we're like, okay, we actually need to start paying attention to this. And this isn't a mental health disorder, but just signs where things might be getting where we need to, again, pay attention, maybe do something about it. If we start noticing that we're getting more headaches or muscle tension, especially like in our upper back or neck. I know for me, it's always my shoulders right here where I know, okay, I think I need to take some deep breaths or take a break. Difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. We often do our best worrying in the evening, right? And that can keep us up at night. Chest pains or rapid heartbeat. Loss of appetite, but usually in us adults, it's more eating those comfort foods, using that as a coping strategy. If we find ourselves getting sick more frequently, like little things, like colds and those sorts of things, that could be a sign of stress. A big one is lack of concentration or focus. Like normally I can focus, but all of a sudden I started to notice that I'm having a harder time focusing, and that might be where it could be a sign of stress. Could also be memory problems or forgetfulness, jitters, irritability. So, right, usually when we're stressed, we unfortunately don't have the patience that we typically have, and we might accidentally take that out on our loved ones, right? Short temper that goes along with that, and that anxiety. We're just worrying about more things in general. So, those are signs of stress in us. And then let's look at the next slide for signs of stress in our kids. All right, so stress in kids, some of these are the same, some are a little bit different. So when our kids, typically we notice that there's a sudden change in behavior. Something seems a little bit off. Also changes in appetite, but for kids, it typically is a decreased appetite. And they also complain of those, we call them somatic symptoms. For kids, it's typically headaches and tummy aches, bedwetting. So bedwetting and this could be bedwetting, but we see that all of a sudden they're showing us a behavior that they haven't shown us in several years. So yeah, they used to have accidents at night when they were 2 or 3, but now they're 7 and they started having them again. It's probably a good time to check in with them. So the ones that are highlighted are really different from adults. So withdrawing from family and friends, sleep disturbances, yes, that could also be in adults, but kids tend to have more nightmares. Kids can also have trouble concentrating, but here's one that's a little bit different, that development of a nervous habit. So all of a sudden they're biting their nails, all of a sudden they're kind of twisting or pulling at their hair where they didn't do that before. Something seems a little bit off. That's a good time to have that conversation with your child, try to get an idea of what's going on, but also just putting some healthy habits in place too, and working with them to sort of name the emotions that they're feeling. Okay, and I think we have another question to share some resources coming up.
Okay, next slide, please. So just wanted to share a few of our resources at County Office of Education for parents that are our go-tos right now. The first one is a young person's guide to wellness, and it really just has a lot of free apps for wellness that are age appropriate and strategies for wellness, similar tips like we shared today. And then the second one is social emotional strategies at home. So again, many things we're talking about today, but more specific ideas around it. So they're all really good reminders to have as go-tos, and how can I continue to build off what we've learned today to embed in home in our daily rituals. And then the last one are tips to supporting your students' virtual learning at home. And really, we just shared a few tips, but there's so many other things that you can do to create a healthy, positive learning environment through distance learning. And so just wanted to make sure you have these as great resources, and you can share them with your parent friends as well. Right.
So another thing, I love using books as a way with elementary school age kids to sort of talk about things. It's much easier and more fun to talk about things when you have characters in a book, right? And typically we want to choose books that aren't too lengthy when we kind of want to talk about these issues. So here are some of my favorites that might be helpful right now. When my worries, oops, next slide. When my worries get too big. Wilma Jean the Worry Machine, that's a picture that you see right there. Stress can really get on your nerves. So that's boys tend to love that one. That one, especially for our kids who I would say are probably third grade and up. And then coping skills for kids workbook. This one is more for if maybe you're seeing some of those signs and you're starting to get a little bit more concerned. Of course, Heather mentioned that's a time too when our kids might need some additional supports. But this book is really a targeted one for older elementary school kids who, you've been working on this for a little while, and it's not just a picture book that you want to read, but you want some more detailed strategies, and that could be a great resource there for you. I have the next slide, please. Here are some other fun ones just for social emotional learning in general. So The Invisible Boy, if you read this one, or Somebody Loves You, Mr. Hatch, you might want to have tissues nearby because they are tear jerkers. Somebody Loves You, Mr. Hatch is a Valentine sort of themed one, but you can read it any time of the year. I got it for my daughter, not age appropriate for her at all, but I just wanted to, have a collection of books, and I was almost in tears reading this. So that's a really great one to work on perspective taking and empathy. There's a man in the book who keeps to himself, doesn't have any friends or support in the community, and he is sent a Valentine that he then shares with everyone, a box of chocolates, and he becomes outgoing and such a wonderful, like just a great member of the community. And then he realizes it wasn't intended for him. And I'll let you know that there was a happy ending for that one. So it's a great book just to sort of think about those things. How Full is Your Bucket is a really fun one. In this one, there's actually an amazing person on YouTube who reads this book, so you don't even need to buy it or check it out from the library. And it's the idea that we all have invisible buckets, and we can either fill somebody's bucket by doing positive things, or we might accidentally or purposely dip from somebody's bucket. And so it's a great book for perspective taking and also having some common language in your house. Like, oh, when you did that to your brother, did you fill his bucket or did you dip from his bucket, right? Or it's also a way for you to be honest with your kids. I thought about what I said to you and I realized that I might have dipped from your bucket and I'm sorry. Um, so having those honest conversations. Stand in My Shoes, another great book for perspective taking. And it's really kind of filling our libraries with these books that we have to read to our kids and just kind of start that conversation with them. All right. And this is a resource that I love. It is our social emotional learning part of our CVESD website. So for this, to access it, if you were to go to cvesd.org, and then if you were to click on My Child's Learning, there's a whole section on social emotional learning. And what we post there's a video there where we kind of describe what social emotional learning is and what we're doing in our classrooms. But more importantly, there are links to our monthly newsletters that are both in English and Spanish. And there's some great resources that we provide there. And it has a theme for each month. And then it has ways to teach your kids those social emotional learning skills at home. So like I mentioned, next month is going to be on really building self-efficacy and a growth mindset. So like the power of yet, there'll be a lot of resources there. And every month there's also a virtual classroom. So it's like a fun thing to do online where the kids can go practice some of those skills in an online environment too. So please check that out. And you can find out more about what we're doing as a school community, but also how you can help support your child with social emotional learning.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth and Heather, for a wonderful discussion and very practical and sound advice that we can put into practice right away. For more resources, please go to our website at eefkids.org. There is a list of valuable resources from the Chula Vista Elementary School District, as Elizabeth just mentioned, the County Office of Education, Kaiser Permanente, military family life counselors, and many, many more. We will also post a presentation on our website so that you can see it again to get some of this terrific advice. Thank you, stay safe, and have a good evening.